Matthew Stewart, you guys ready? Good evening and welcome to the weekly Lawrence City Commission meeting. I want to just take a moment and thank the Vice Mayor and members of the commission who kind of filled in for me a week ago when I was kind of under the weather, and I know that they did a great job because I watched just a little bit of it. So it was great, but thank you all very much, and members of the public, thank you for your understanding. First item on the agenda tonight is the consent agenda, and all matters listed on the consent agenda to be considered under one motion will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion on those items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. So are there any items on the consent agenda that a member of the commission would like to have removed for separate discussion? Is there any item on the consent agenda that a member of the public would like to have removed for separate consideration and discussion? Okay, hearing none, we need to also add claims to 169 vendors in the amount of $3,516,280.35. So with the addition of claims, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Second. Motion made and second to approve the consent agenda was made by Commissioner Larsen, second by Commissioner Herbert. Any other questions or comments? All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That item passes 5-0. Next item is the city manager's report.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. A couple of items for you this evening. We wanted to let you know that we will be holding a public meeting on proposed improvements to 19th Street. The area of 19th is from Iowa to Naismith, and that meeting will be held at Fire Station number 5 there on the corner of 19th and Iowa from 7 to 8. And that will be next week on Wednesday, March the 2nd. So we wanted to get that word out to the community and also let you know and the members of the public know that KU has advised us that they are undertaking some work on the Irving Hill Bridge, and that's going to be over the spring break week. And at that time, there will be traffic impacts there on Iowa Street. So just to advise you. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, questions of city manager? Okay, Diane, next Wednesday evening on March 2nd, I think the CAC actually has a meeting at the same time, if I remember right. So I know I won't be there at that, at the public meeting on 19th Street.
No, it's a busy week of meetings, I think.
Yeah, there's a number of things going on, so we might want to split up, some of our time to make sure that we at least have maybe one of us at each one of these meetings. You'll be there? Okay, yeah. That sounds good. So anybody else can obviously always attend, but we'll have a whole list of things to go through.
And we'll certainly be providing you all updates too with regard to that meeting as we talk about that project further.
And it's a public meeting, so we don't have to worry about quorum.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions on the city manager's report? Okay. Then the next item is general public comment. The public is allowed to speak on any items or issues that are not scheduled on the agenda after first being recognized by the mayor. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer those items to the staff for follow-up. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address. Speakers should address all comments and questions to the commission. So at this time, is there any general public comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda? I do know that I was called by one person about an item that she wanted to speak under general public comment this evening. Obviously, she's not here yet, but I think she did send a PowerPoint. Somebody said that was Melinda Henderson, but I don't know if we just got done too quick or not. So is there any general public comment?
I want to mention something.
Okay.
There's a couple new people out in the audience, and there's an agenda, a paper copy that we keep over by the doors so that people can follow along if they choose to.
Okay. So, any general public comment? Okay, well, if if the individual does come forward, come later in the meeting, I would ask the commission if we might give time for that item to be heard, okay?
Okay.
Fair enough. Okay. Thank you all. Next item, we are on to the regular agenda. Again, the public is allowed to speak on any of the regular agenda items or give public comment after first being recognized by the mayor. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address. Speakers, again, should address all questions and comments to the commission. I would ask if you did bring your cell phone this evening, if you would silence that so that we do not have disruption of speakers who are at the podium this evening. So the first item on the regular agenda is to conduct a public hearing to consider the vacation of a portion of a 10-foot platted utility easement along the east property line of 3440 West 6th Street. That is the Quick Shop Incorporated property. The application was submitted by Jason Loader with Caw Valley Engineering for property owner Dillon Real Estate Company, Inc. Chuck.
Good evening. This is pretty straightforward. This is the Quick Shop on the corner of 6th and Castle. Apparently, at some point, an encroachment was built into a platted utility easement. The easement is not needed by any of the current utility users, any of our franchise users. We've contacted all of them, and they don't have any problems with this vacation. It was found when the property underwent some kind of real estate exchange, and in order to clear that up, they are requesting the vacation of 5 foot of that easement. There's additional easement further to the east, but again, none of the utilities have any issues. We notified all the adjacent property owners within 200 feet, have had no objections, so city staff would recommend approval of the vacation. Your action tonight will be to open the public hearing, and pending comment, and your discussion would be to consider that order of vacation.
Is there any questions, staff? You know, the only thing, that is just utility easement down through there, right? That's not a drainage or anything like
No,
that?
it was just for utilities, platted utility easement.
Okay. I was out by there, and it sure looked like that would be a nice drainage way, but that's fine. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I would entertain a motion then to open the public hearing for the consideration of the vacation of the platted utility easement.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second to open the public hearing was made by Commissioner Boley, second by Vice Mayor Soden. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? That passes 5-0. At this time, the public hearing is open. Are there any members of the public that wish to make comment on this item? Any public comment on this item? Entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second to close the public hearing, made by Commissioner Boley, second by Commissioner Herbert. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Public hearing is closed. The item before us is to consider approval of an order of vacation for this utility easement. Is there any discussion by the commission on this item or any further questions?
I'm just curious about one little thing.
Please.
It's very minor. It says Dillon Real Estate Company. Is that Dillon's the grocery store?
I believe it probably is.
It's not like a last name of something.
No,
I'm
it's
just curious.
Dillon, I think it's Dillon's Quick Shop, so anyway, that would be my guess. And the gentleman's shaking his head, so I think we got the right answer. So, okay, are there other questions or any discussion? Okay, if not, I would entertain a motion to approve the order of vacation for the utility easement at 3440 West 6th Street as requested by the property owner.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second to approve the order of vacation was made by Vice Mayor Soden, second by Commissioner Boley. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? That passes 5-0. Mercy, this next item's gonna take me a while, so settle in. Next item on the agenda is to consider adopting on first reading ordinance number 9167, amending Chapter 5, Article 1 of the City of Lawrence, the administrative provisions. Ordinance number 9168, adopting the International Building Code to the 2015 edition. Ordinance number 9169, adopting the International Residential Code, the 2015 edition. Ordinance number 9170, adopting the National Electrical Code, the 2014 edition. Ordinance number 9171, adopting the International Plumbing Code, 2015 edition. Ordinance number 9172, adopting the International Mechanical Code, and this is 2015 edition. Ordinance number 9173, adopting the International Fuel Gas Code, 2015 edition. Ordinance number 9174, adopting the International Energy Conservation Code, 2015 edition. Ordinance number 9175, adopting the International Existing Building Code, 2015 edition. Ordinance number 9176, amending Chapter 5, Article 12 of the City of Lawrence Code to increase demolition permit fees. Ordinance number 9199, adopting the International Fire Code, 2015 edition. And ordinance number 9203, adopting the International Property Maintenance Code, the 2015 edition. Kurt?
Sorry about that,
No,
Mr.
it's,
Mayor.
you know.
It's a lot of ordinances, I know. Good evening, Mayor and City Commissioners. I'm Kurt Schroeder with Planning and Development Services. Over the past 10 to 12 months, the city's building, fire, and trade construction advisory boards and staff have completed technical review of the 2015 editions of the International Code Council, or ICC, family of model building and construction codes, the 2014 edition of the National Electrical Code, and the 2015 edition of the ICC International Property Maintenance Code. Currently, the city operates under the 2012 editions of the ICC codes and the 2011 edition of the National Electrical Code is locally amended. The ICC model codes and National Electrical Code are updated and republished on 3-year cycles, and the city strives to update the codes on the same cycle. The city's building demolition code relating to fees charged for demolition permits was also reviewed. The advisory boards conducted approximately 36 public meetings over the past year to review the new codes. Staff would like to publicly thank the board members for their commitment, diligence, and expertise in reviewing these codes and in making recommendation for these code adoptions. A series of proposed ordinances adopting these codes, as you just read, is recommended by the advisory boards and staff with local amendments are provided for your consideration and approval on first reading tonight after receiving public input. The effective date of all the proposed ordinances would be July 1st, 2016. Before reviewing the staff memo, I wanted to take a moment to introduce the principal staff involved in the code review process and ordinance development. Of course, Planning and Development Services Director Scott McCullough, Building Official Barry Wathel for the building, residential building, and trade codes, Fire Chief Mark Bradford and Fire Marshal Jim King for the fire code, and Code Enforcement Manager Brian Jimenez for the property maintenance code. They are here to answer any specific questions you might have on the proposed codes and adopting ordinances. I'd also like to thank Development Services staff members Adrian Jones, Janet Smalter, Mark Mills, Patrick O'Brien, and Lee Queen, who did significant code review and analysis and staffed the advisory board meetings over the past year. The scope of construction activity regulated by each code and the family of model codes is outlined in our staff memo. As you can see, the International Residential Building Code regulates pretty much everything related to 1 and 2 dwelling construction. All the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, the structural, energy, everything is contained in that IRC or International Residential Code. All the other family of codes on this list, like the International Building Code, International Existing Building Code, Energy Conservation Code, and the trade codes basically relate to everything other than 1 and 2 family construction and basically commercial, office, multifamily, that kind of construction and remodeling activity. As we said, we do like to try to keep current with those 3-year cycles of the publication of the International Code family. We think it has been a factor in helping us with the Insurance Service Organization rating system for cities around our area and around the country. And it has had an effect on some of our insurance rates, particularly as related to flood insurance rates and possibly some of the community insurance rates. It also avoids, if we would wait 6 years or 9 years between cycles, there'd be some big changes probably, and it might be a shock to a lot of the designers and builders. I did want to briefly, we've kind of highlighted in the memo, the various codes and what we and the board have seen as the most significant issues. I mean, obviously there's a lot of tweaks, there's a lot of amendments that have been done from cycle to cycle that we've carried over. We had discussions and we've kept them in our ordinance adoptions. However, wanted to walk through some of these more significant ones with you. The first, and probably one of the most significant changes, was a requirement in the 2015 building code, International Building Code, that schools K through 12 and emergency operations facilities that are newly constructed or added onto have storm shelters constructed to the standards in the building codes. That has been basically a voluntary thing in the past. If someone wanted to designate a storm shelter, say in a school, and they wanted to have it that way, then they had to design to that standard, but they were not required to actually build a shelter with that new construction. We did post a memo to your agenda this afternoon. We have been in pretty significant discussions with the USD 497 in the last couple of weeks, and we think they're positive discussions and ongoing. So what we're recommending through that is that tonight, if we choose to adopt the IBC ordinance, that we modify it before the second reading to basically hold to the status quo, not require storm shelters for those types of facilities, and then come back to you in 3 to 6 months after we've had discussions with them, other private schools, some of the emergency facilities operators, to give you some other options possibly for adoption. So I won't spend a lot of time then on that. The other thing that we think is significant and we think will be very beneficial to some of the business community is the requirements for 2 restrooms, a male and a female, in many types of occupancies, depending on the occupant load or the use type of the building. It has been set in the codes for several cycles at 15. So if you had a business and the occupant load was more than 15, you were supposed to have 2 separate restrooms. We've proposed here some amendments that would move that number for new construction and these types of things to 30, which probably would help a lot of the types of businesses we see. They're 2,000 square foot, 2,500 square foot business occupancies. They could get by with one unisex restroom, and we think that still maintains healthy and sanitary environment. Also in the existing building code, there were some things about restrooms. So if someone was going into an existing mercantile space, say a new insurance office or something, and then their occupant load was over a certain amount, then they had to construct that second bathroom. This would ease that burden tremendously, we think, by if it's an existing space, 2,000 square foot less than that, and it's not a bar or restaurant, then the one restroom would suffice. So that could be significant savings to business operators. There is an item in here about swimming pools. The 2015 International Code Council did, late in 2015, publish a new separate standard for swimming pools and spas. That was done late, so we did not really have a chance to review that with our boards. So we're just saying that we would like to kind of continue as we have it now, with the requirements in the code, the actual body of the code, and then probably review that with our boards at the next cycle. The other thing that they looked at, the boards, and we did on the swimming pools, was upping the fence height requirement to 72 inches, which basically is the same as the health department requirements for swimming pools. Energy conservation. The International Residential Code, probably that's one of the, I wouldn't say it's a big change, actually. More or less the residential code, the 2015 edition of the residential code, the ICC code, kind of caught up to what we were doing locally when we developed our own standards in 2012 that you adopted. It's kind of a separate appendix. It kind of had what's called a home energy rating system that allowed designers not only to build to the prescriptive requirements of the code, you know, wall widths and things like that, but also to have other designs that cumulatively could achieve a very low energy usage in a residential structure. So the new code, 2015, talk about that kind of option, Energy Rating Index, and also HERS, which I just mentioned is one of those. So it's kind of a situation where, I'm not saying they're following us, but the code, the 2015 codes are actually outlining some things that we've already adopted and been doing here. We feel like we've had really good success with that. When you adopted this in 2012 or 2013, it was kind of each year, there was a score that you get for HERS, if that's the option they use, and most people do. And the lower the score, under 100, the better. So eventually when you get to 0, basically it's no net energy use in that structure. So they went from first year of implementation, 80 was a target, then 70, 75, and now 70 this year. We've had good success with it. We got scores. We think we're a leader in the area in terms of this. Other jurisdictions either have not adopted these, or they're not really enforcing them, or getting verification that things were constructed to meet those design requirements, and we are. So we're suggesting, as is the board, that we kind of hold where we are now at 70. We have been seeing scores of well under 70 on average, around 64, 65 on many units, some lower. But we think locally we've done a great job, and the industry's done a great job, and we can continue to achieve success without adopting the lower kind of HERS standard of 54 that was proposed in the 2015 IRC. And that's the first time they had actually proposed something like that. Barry Walthall can answer questions about that later if you've got specific questions. The memo did outline a number of reasons why we thought we should just go with what we have now and continue that way. Some other miscellaneous items, carbon monoxide alarms have been required for a couple of code cycles. Now they're required to be, if you're building a new structure, in addition, hardwired into the home wiring system, similar to what's happened with smoke alarms over the years. And there's some new sections on roof-mounted photovoltaic systems, which we've already been enforcing actually for the last 2 or 3 years since we've done a lot of this in our town, fortunately, and worked with the industry people and fire department. So we're actually enforcing these requirements already in our code. The International Fire Code, I think, yes, Fire Marshal is here. So I'm just good, this just highlights some of the main changes in that code. They did establish a number basically for congregate living type of residences where you have unrelated people, I think 5 or more, then they would be required, which has kind of been their requirement for several years. So if you have a congregate living facility like that, you would have to sprinkle and do some alarm and detection systems in the building. So that's really not new, but this just clarifies that to match development code and other things that we enforce. The animal housing facilities, obviously there's been a lot of discussion about that previously. I know the fire department's been here a couple of times talking about that. And they are not requiring necessarily fire sprinkling of those facilities, but they are requiring certain kinds of smoke detection and alarm systems to be installed in those facilities. And there's a thing here about aerial luminaries, which is kind of the floating lanterns you see on the commercials. They've actually already been covering that in some local amendments previously, but it showed up in the 2015 fire code, I think, for the first time this year. So it's something that we've already not allowed in the city of Lawrence. And then there's some other things about fire alarm requirements in existing mixed-use occupancies, which I'm sure Jim King can expand on if you'd like. One of the bigger ones is the 2015 International Property Maintenance Code. That is the one that governs existing property, conditions on premises, those types of requirements. I'm sure you recall last spring and summer, there was quite a bit of discussion about what can be stored in people's yards, particularly as related to urban agriculture, implements that are used for urban ag, what's stored on a property for urban ag and those types of things. You did direct Scott and his shop to initiate some text amendments to the development code on that. They've been working hard on that for 4 or 5 months, and it's still in that process. We do intend to add a section in the property maintenance code once we know exactly what's going to come out of the development code. We didn't want to try to put something in here now, so we've reserved a section so that they can complement each other and won't be at odds with each other ultimately once the development code regulations are adopted. Other than that, there wasn't a whole lot of major changes between the 2012 and the 2015 property maintenance, International Property Maintenance Code. A few new definitions which didn't affect the way we operate at all, and those are fine in our opinion. We did add some new definitions as related to the section that you were most going to discuss, I think, when you talked about this last summer, which was what could be stored in someone's yard, particularly in a residential yard. We've added some new definitions to give some specificity, like what is salvage material, what is tree waste, what is bulky waste, those types of things that could be used to better define what you can and can't store or have in that yard. So that is in here, and we think that'll be real helpful in that section on exterior storage to both residents, so they'll know exactly what's expected, and for us in terms of enforcement. We've also changed some sections relating to handrails and guardrails. We think it's a benefit to owners of older property that might have, when we've seen a lot of this in our rental inspection program, older properties that might have 5 or 6 stairs going up to their porch, and they've always had a handrail or 2, but not a guardrail, with the intermittent spacing guards on it. So we've modified this to kind of allow a height up to 42 inches up a stair to it, like a porch or a deck, without requiring those guards. And we think that is still safe. They'll have a handrail or handrails, but not those guards. And we think that kind of fits a lot of what we see in the city, and it still would keep people safe. So we've made some suggestions there. We've also added some modifications to egress window requirements we think are beneficial or provide some options to people that have existing spaces, say in basements, where they can provide built-in stairs or landings below a window as long as they got the right window size, et cetera. So we think it adds some options for those kind of conditions. And then finally, there's a few minor edits to the kind of the fire regulations that are in the existing building structures, mostly related to placement of smoke alarms and things like that. There's some new provisions in the 2015 edition, but we will not force, if someone has, say, put a smoke alarm previously too close to a kitchen, they don't really encourage that now, then we're not going to make them move it, but make sure they just have the appropriate locations otherwise. So, and then there's some other things for things like multiple family units, apartment houses, which we've been kind of working through with the rental ordinance over the past year and a half or so. And they've found their way in here. I think it just gives options for people to have a detection system, alarm system in lieu of sprinkling and things like that. So those are in here as well. Finally, demolition permit fees. It's not part of any international code, but we do have a section in our code about requiring demolition permits. We're asking to increase the fee from $50 to $100. The reason being, it hadn't been changed in 30 years almost, but the other is that we publish all of those so people have a chance to comment. That costs about $50, $60 just for that. So this would just cover the cost basically. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you have. And like I said, there's other staff here much more knowledgeable of the specifics than I am.
Questions?
I have a quick vocabulary question. Under the tiny houses part where it says that you can have a habitable room that's a minimum of 7 by 10 feet, is a habitable room, is that any room in a house, or is that a bedroom, or I don't know what a habitable room is?
Well, it wouldn't be, for example, an unfinished basement or a mechanical room or attic. But yeah, just about any room except maybe a bathroom
Okay. So like
where
the
where you
living
can
room,
kind of stay and
dining
live
room.
and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I understand now, thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, just a question. On the energy code, right now we're at 70, is that right?
That's correct, effective July 1st of this year.
And the 2015 was 54, what they proposed, and what sort of savings would that give us if we went from 70 to 54 as far as energy efficiency?
I'm going to let Barry try to respond to that. He's much more knowledgeable in energy stuff. Thanks.
Thank you. Barry Walthall with Planning and Development Services. The monetary savings, never done that calculation, but basically that would be a 16% increase in performance for a house that scored a 70, and a house that scored a 54. And what that measures is going to be the use of energy, electricity, gas, primarily. I'm not sure that answers your question.
Well, I know I did some reading on it just to kind of get an idea, and it seemed like I had read that really to take that much of a jump, considering we were already at 70, which is a really good number, was really only an energy savings of about 1% or 2%. Have you?
I would estimate that's probably correct. It's the cost savings there is probably pretty minimal. It does add up over time, and that's the whole purpose of the energy code, is to reduce the cost of energy over time. And it really stacks up over years. The lifetime of a house is usually considered to be 30 or 40 years as far as calculating those energy expenses. So 1% over 30 years, if that's $100 a year, over 30 years, it's $3,000. So really, that's pretty modest. When you're talking about a house that you're using the benchmark from 2006, which was a score of 100, and now you're talking about a score of 54, you're getting into thousands and thousands of dollars over that 30 or 40 year period. But the increase from 70 to 54 is a lot more modest.
Okay. Then I've also noticed that there's studies starting to come out that trying to find a balance as to how tight you want your house, which essentially is what this is doing, is saying we
Right.
want a tighter house. And that if we get too tight, we start running into problems with vapors in the house not being able to circulate throughout, and you start running some health issues that way. Have you guys done much of that?
That's absolutely correct, and that's something you have to be very careful about. And the codes are taking that into account. The tightness of the houses currently, and it won't change for 2015, but currently houses have to basically allow no more than 3 air changes per hour between the outside air and the inside air. That's really too tight to be healthy. So the code does require basically that some outside air is brought into the house through not just infiltration that you would see in older houses, through cracks and just little tiny openings that air finds its way into the house. So now you're designing the house to bring in air on purpose through an exhaust system or a ventilation system. Usually that's a mechanical ventilation system that's tied into your furnace system. There's different ways to do that, but that's the most common way currently. But that's a very real concern and something that we monitor closely.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
Follow-up question about the tiny homes, the minimum room size. I guess what I want to make sure is that reduction in the minimum square feet for a habitable room, is that only if your total square footage for the house is under an X amount of square feet. Like if you're building a 500 square foot home, then you can take advantage of a minimum room size would be 7 by 10. Because I want to make sure if someone's building, you know, like a more regular sized home, that they aren't putting like 5 bedrooms in it that are 7 by 10.
Okay. Collect my thoughts just a moment there. The reduction to 70 is across the board, and that's a reduction from 120 to 70. And that 120 was for a single habitable room in the entire house. It didn't limit any particular other room to a maximum or minimum size. So traditional construction, you'll see probably several rooms that are 120 square feet or larger, living room, dining room, master bedroom. But it's very common for second, third, and fourth bedrooms to actually be smaller than 120 square feet. 70 to 80 square feet would probably be pretty typical for a second bedroom. And that 120 number was really an arbitrary number that was arrived at decades ago, and everybody just found to be a satisfactory number. The reduction to 70 is not seen as really a major factor for traditional construction. It's seen as a help for the tiny houses or the minimalist living houses.
I would imagine it hurts maybe the marketability of your home if you had a 1,200 square foot house and all the rooms are 7 by 10.
I think that would be a very good observation. I think with the traditionally constructed homes, it's very common today, and realtors might be able to speak to this better than I could, but home buyers want open spaces and open houses. And,
Yeah.
the requirement for 120 square foot habitable space has just not been a factor. I can't remember ever seeing a traditional home built with a room that was even close to being smaller than that. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Just a real quick question. It's kind of diving into minutia. I apologize for that, but on the International Property Maintenance Code, 605.2 receptacles, it talks about where ground fault circuit interrupter outlets will be required. And it says that GFCI outlets will be required at all locations within 6 feet of water. Is there any grounds to document an exception with regards to refrigerators? So I know a lot of electricians will tell you it's ill-advised to place a refrigerator on a ground fault outlet due to, obviously, when it trips, you lose everything inside. And a lot of homes are designed with the refrigerator within 6 feet of a water source being a sink. Is that something that was considered at all, or?
I'm going to defer that question to Brian. I can answer questions about ground fault circuit interrupters, but I'm not an expert on the property maintenance code. Brian, would you?
Sure.
If I can help follow up, or?
Sure, you can help follow up. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. We tweaked that code section a little bit. It used to be all kitchen countertop receptacles, so we were making people GFCI protect something that was far away, like if there was just on each side of the stove or something like that.
Right.
And what we found out, that was sort of a ticky-tack thing we were trying to do. So we went, and if Barry might correct me, but we basically sort of mirrored some of the IRC requirements on the 6-foot distance requirement. Typically what we find on a refrigerator is that is served by an independent outlet that's not on the kitchen countertop. It's usually directly behind the refrigerator. So I don't think that would be an issue.
Yeah, and yeah, typically you definitely would want a fridge on a separate, but if the fridge falls within 6 foot of a water source, would it still meet the qualifications to require that GFCI?
If it was plugged in and that receptacle only serviced the refrigerator, but it happened to be within 6 feet of the
6 foot of a
water,
sink?
I can see where you're coming from on that. I think then we
Because basically every house in the Prairie Park, Brook Creek area that was built in the 50s and 60s, the kitchen layout places the fridge within 6 feet of the sink.
Yeah,
So,
I haven't been in as many homes lately as I have previous in my employment, but from my recollection, typically in those type of houses, you have the refrigerator at the end of the counter. Gosh, I can't, I would say most of those don't have an outlet serving that refrigerator on the countertop. It's usually directly behind the
Yeah,
wall.
okay.
But I mean, it might be a discretionary call we can make out in the field.
Yeah, it's just a little thing. I just know that that has come up before with rental registration.
Right.
Where, properties have been dinged for that. And, the electrician will come in and tell you, well, I'll do it, but
No.
I'm telling you, it's a bad idea.
It is a bad idea to put that on that breaker because those are more prone to
Right.
trip. And then next thing you know, you come home and your refrigerator's been off 8 hours while you were gone
Right.
to work. Right.
Other questions? I got a question, Kirk, would it be about the plumbing code? And did you bring up a discussion about drinking fountains? And again, that load number being increased from 15 to 30?
I'm not sure. Did they discuss that, Perry?
The drinking fountains?
Uh-huh. Requirements?
I apologize, I didn't completely hear the question.
Oh, under the ordinance number 9171, it talks about the building code. And one of the things that I noticed was drinking fountains shall not be required for an occupant load of, it was 15 all along and now it's
Right.
30. So is that similar to what we were talking about, or Kurt was talking about earlier with the bathrooms and increasing that load number?
Yes, and very similar. It's really the same issue. Water fountains are, occupants of buildings are using water fountains and drinking water in different ways than they have in the past. And we feel, and the board felt, that the requirement for a drinking fountain in those smaller occupancies was really probably not necessary. You'll see a lot of people carrying their own water, and those smaller occupancies, that just seem like more burden than
No, I think it's a
necessary.
good idea. I want to make sure that everybody saw that. Were there any changes, and I read through this several times, and I know 7, 8 years ago when we discussed the change from the uniform code to the international family codes, there was a lot of discussion about med gas at the time. There's no changes in any of the med gas requirements?
No changes, and we still have a requirement before occupancy is approved that we collect reports and have the responsible facility authority acknowledge that they've received and reviewed and all of the testing is complete and up to date.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. One of the things that I do want to say, and we talked about, Lisa, you brought up the energy code and discussion there. And I know Bobby and Kelly's back here, but I just got to say this, was it 4 years ago when we were talking about the energy code and the new updates that were going to happen under the I-codes. I think it was the Home Builders Association that really took a lot of it upon themselves to assist in the writing of the code to make sure that we had a code not only that worked, that met the, the numbers that we wanted to meet. So, I think that there was a lot of discussion that was done there, but they need to be, thanked a lot for the work that they did 4 years ago and making sure that we have, an international code that's just catching up to what we have on the book. So I think that that's something that we really need to thank them for.
We are thankful for their assistance, and they've been very involved with this process as well. Very helpful. It's good to get those viewpoints and incorporate those into the process early, and we can, at the board level, advisory board level, really take those comments into account and try to craft something that works. So that's been a strength of the process.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, just on the energy code, or the energy efficiency code. I had the opportunity to sit down with Scott and his staff here a few weeks ago or so, just to go over, so I could better understand what we have actually in the books. And I was really pleased with what I saw, and I really appreciate your work on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, guys? Okay. General public comment on this item? Any public comment?
Good evening, I'm Bobby Flory with the Lawrence Home Builders Association. I said I was going to stand up and say, yeah, what Barry said, because this is a big topic and there's a lot to go over, but, and I don't want to repeat everything he said, but we were very involved, attended the Building Code Trade Board meetings for about a year's worth of meetings. The people that are on these code boards really dug in, rolled their sleeves up and worked on this. They took it very seriously, and they had excellent support from staff. So I feel really good about this, and in particular, what I want to address tonight is the amendment with the energy code. That is something that we were very interested in because the 2015 code recommend, as we heard tonight, it going to a 54. We feel that staying at a 70 is appropriate. When we went from the 2009 to the 2012, it was at that time that it seemed like the low-hanging fruit were picked. That's when we made the biggest strides in the gains from the energy efficiency. But when we go from a 70 to a 54, it's more costly and the benefits aren't there. And the builders have embraced these energy codes, but that's because they have realized that there's a benefit to the buyers and their homes. But now we are seeing, when you go to the 54, that benefit is getting smaller and smaller. They had a concern about that. The other thing is that the houses that have the most difficulty achieving these low scores, unfortunately, are those that are in our affordable housing stock. Those slab houses, smaller homes, those are the ones that are the most challenged. When you have a big house that has a basement, they can take advantage of that, that natural insulation factor of a basement, and there are other design features in the bigger houses that can get the low scores pretty easily. But when you get like a Habitat house or just a single family, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house on a slab, they are really challenged to get the low scores. And so to exasperate our affordable housing issue by making it more difficult for them to achieve, we think is the wrong way to go. But it was really critical that there's legislation that requires the Secretary of Energy to do an analysis every time we have a code change. And Barry and Kurt mentioned it, but this, when we went from the 2012, they did the analysis to 2015, they found that there was a 1% reduction in the amount of energy consumed by a building, 1% reduction in the total raw fuel required to serve a building, and less than 1% reduction in energy cost per year. So the savings to the home buyer just aren't there, and the substantial cost, which is estimated anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 of a basic house. And that varies because when you use this energy rating index, it gives the builders flexibility in the methods they use to get there as opposed to the prescriptive method. So their range and their building practices affect that price. But at a minimum, it would be about $2,000 for them to meet that code. We believe at this point with our energy codes that it really should be a decision between the builder and the buyer, and that they should talk about how far they want to take it beyond what our minimum standards would be at 70 and how much more they're willing to pay. So some people are really going to keep going and take it lower, while other people really will all they can do is afford to stay at the 70. During the next code cycle, when the other communities around us have increased their code requirements, when technologies have advanced, and when we have a better source of building supplies, so the supply and demand, the prices will go down a little bit. All those factors come into play. So when we review the next code cycle, I think it's appropriate at that time that this number be revisited, and we'll see where we end up, because in 3 years, a 54 may be very, very easy for us to attain, but right now getting there would be difficult. So we would just support the recommendation from your building trade boards, plumbing, electrical, mechanical, and from the building staff with adopting the 2015 I-codes along with the amendments that are proposed. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'm impressed. Very good. Any questions, Bobby? Okay, thank you. Other public comment on this item? Any other public comment? All new building codes, and this is it, huh? Okay, it's amazing. Well, anyway, thank you all for coming this evening on this item if you're here. So anyway, back to the commission. There other questions of staff? Any things that we need to look at further?
I have a procedural question.
Please.
Do we need to do each ordinance one at a time, or can we do them as a group?
I'm gonna rattle them off all in one big pile.
Got it.
I think we ought to make Mike read it.
I think we're not gonna make
Over
Mike
and
read
over.
it one more
I just want to make sure
time.
we can do that.
We could actually have you go through the entire ordinance.
Okay. I do want to go back to the item that we have that talks about the tornado shelter. And is your suggestion that we go ahead and adopt it as written, and then next week or a week after, whenever this comes back for its second reading, it will be changed or amended at that point?
Basically to say what it says today. So it wouldn't be required until we go out and have that other discussion and come back to you in 3 or 6 months.
I assume we won't forget, right?
So, yeah, so that particular one, you might want to single out to give us direction to do that.
Okay. Sounds good.
Mayor, if I may, I might recommend, if you choose to do it as a group, with 2 caveats. One is the issue on the storm shelters, and one is to direct us to clarify the language regarding refrigerators. So it's in the code, and builders, landlords and staff all have the same expectation, the same language to draw from, so.
How do you measure the 6 feet, Scott? Do you measure it along the wall and to the outlet?
Yeah, I
Or
think
do you
it's
just do it direct?
it's a direct,
I think doing it along the wall and to the outlet would be longer than direct.
it still may present the same issue
Yeah.
for
I think you're
refrigerators,
going to be
but
amazed at how many
Yeah,
properties you
I'm-
find within
Yeah,
six. I mean,
I think it's a good point.
I just think if we can agree that the issue is that the refrigerators in particular shouldn't be on
Right.
GFCIs for some pretty obvious reasons, then we need to clarify it in the code.
Are those 2 caveats on the same ordinance or on different ordinances?
Okay, which ordinance, what ordinance number do we have on the storm shelters again?
Property maintenance code is 9103, 9203, excuse me. And the building code, Barry? 9168. 9168, 9203.
Make sure we got that.
and that's,
9168 is the storm shelter one, and 9203 is the property maintenance item.
I just got them flipped.
Okay, were there any other changes or corrections? Thanks, Scott. That anyone else wanted to bring up? Okay. If there's not, I would entertain a motion to adopt on ordinance, on first reading, ordinance number 9167, 9168, which is the International Building Code and Property Maintenance section, and direct staff to rewrite that portion that deals with the measuring of the electrical receptacle dealing with refrigerators. Okay? Is that fair enough?
That's a different ordinance number, but.
Yeah, they told us wrong.
You told us?
9168 is a storm shelter.
Okay.
9160 is the storm shelter, 9203 is the property
Okay.
maintenance code.
I'm sorry.
GFCI.
Okay, 9168 then is the property maintenance code that deals with, that do what you have to do, and directing staff to deal with the change in the language that deals with storm shelters, and that it'll be considered at a later date, I guess, is where we're going to head on that. Okay, so ordinance number 9167, 9168, 9169, 9170, 9171, 9172, 9173, 9174, 9175, 9176, 9199, and ordinance number 9203. And that one deals with the International Building Code, property maintenance, and it directs staff to deal with the language change to take care of the deal with refrigerator electrical outlets, okay? So with those changes in that direction given, I would entertain a motion to adopt on first reading those ordinances that I just listed.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second to adopt on first reading those ordinances with those changes made by Vice Mayor Soden, second by Commissioner Herbert. All in favor of that motion, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. A special thanks to all of our boards and our staff that worked on this over the last year or so, and we appreciate all the work that was done by all the organizations. So make sure that we pass along all of our thank yous, okay?
Yeah, your work is a lot of work.
A lot of work.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is to receive the pavement management program update and 2016 pavement management program and approve, including additional expenditures for inclusion of bike facility and traffic calming improvements.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Excuse me. There we go. I guess first of all, I'd like to say how honored I am each year to represent this program. I'm the guy that's out front telling you about it, the good things that the program's done for the community, but it's really the staff and the community and the contractors that do the work that are making this a program successful. In fact, when I interviewed for this job in 2008, it was one of the things that interested me and attracted me to the position in Lawrence. You have a really good pavement maintenance program that's been successful. And there's that team I was talking about. Excuse me. We've just, the way that this program works is just very inclusive of everybody, all the professional staff we have at the city, property owners, the different advisory boards we have. It's amazing the dynamics involved in coming up with a program each year. Our goals with this program are pretty straightforward. We have broken down the street systems into 3 groups: arterials, collectors, and residential streets. And you can see there the PCI goal that we shoot for. PCI is a pavement condition index for anybody that may not be aware or familiar with that acronym. It's rated, we rate our streets from 0 to 100, 100 being a brand new street. And we rate our streets, every year we rate 25% of our lane miles a year. And so in a 4-year cycle, in 4 years, we complete 1 cycle, and we are currently in phase 2 of cycle 4. So we've collected a lot of pavement data. We have a lot of information that's available for us to analyze the areas where the program's been successful, the areas where the program needs to continue to progress. But you can see some of the numbers there in terms of how, just basically how the program has grown and its success from the number of fair to poor streets when we started this program to where the numbers are to date. And I would mention one of the objectives or one of the ideas or concepts behind this program is that certain streets are not candidates or not good candidates for pavement maintenance. In other words, they're in a condition that really we're wasting our money to do maintenance on. And so one of our goals of this program is to keep our streets from getting into that range, that maintenance is no longer an option. In other words, we would recommend that they be completely reconstructed, which is obviously a very expensive alternative. Pothole numbers is obviously a frustrating topic for the community, but it's a very good indicator for us of how the program is working. We have shown over the years, over the 10 years of the program since 2006, that the pothole numbers has shown some reduction. However, the numbers that we're seeing in 14 and last year are starting to increase again. So that's a little concerning to us, and we're looking at some different ideas about why that may be, especially given the fact that the last several winters we've had fewer freeze-thaw cycles. We've had basically pretty mild winters, which should show, should benefit that program. So it's something that we got to continue to monitor and keep an eye on. I'm going to talk about that a little bit further in the program when we talk about the 2016 program. But this just basically shows us how we track the numbers. We get a lot of reports to us, but we also actively have street division staff. I've got a little sticky notepad hangs down from my visor in my car when I'm driving around and I see areas that need to be, when I get a chance, I'll pull over and write a sticky note down and stick it in Mike Perkins's box, and hey, there's the pothole. So we really do look for those when we're out there. I would note to you the comment I made about the numbers increasing, and if you look at the 2015 potholes patch number, it's actually lower than 14. And I asked Steve Lashley, our pavement engineer, and Mike to tell me why if the numbers are going up, why that number is lower. And what they told me is that in situations now where we see 3 or 4 or 5 potholes in a specific area, instead of patching each of those separately, they'll mill that area or grind it down and make one patch, so that gets reported as one pothole patch. It's a bigger patch, but it doesn't get reported as the 5 or 3 or 4. So I thought I'd explain that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, but I think this is probably the most important slide that's in this entire presentation. It shows 4 things for you. It shows the funding level for the program. It shows the deterioration rates, the PCIs, and the streets that are in fair to poor condition. And when I explain this program to a new engineer that comes in, or when we're talking to our street guys down there, I talk about our program as a pyramid or even a 3-legged stool. And what I mean by that is, the program is basically supported by its funding source, its ability to be a good program and successful, and the people. And so if you lose any one of those 3 legs of that stool, you get a little bit of a weakness in the program. And so I want to point out with this, if you look from 2005 to date, especially if you look at the deterioration rate, which is the purple line, excuse me, and the red line, which is the funding line, you can see when the program started, the deterioration rates increased. That's a good thing. It sounds backwards, but it's a plus. That's a plus number, which is good. 0 is a no movement. A negative deterioration rate means that we're losing ground. Positive means we're going in the right direction. And you can see with the funding tracking there out to 2015 that we have started since 2014 to see a parallel between the deterioration rate and the funding. And I think it's key to recognize that those 2 numbers are tied very closely together. Just quickly want to show you the different things we do with this program. It's broken into contracted and internal. We do right now program contracted does curb and gutter, which is a little deceiving because it's curb and gutter with other projects like our mill and overlay projects and our microsurfacing. We do not have a standalone curb and gutter program for the most part. Microsurfacing program, which is a thin asphalt applied surface to rejuvenate the pavement. And then we have a traditional mill and overlay program. Our in-house program is pretty strong. There's a lot of elements to it. We've grown that since the inception of this program. And then we continue to look for new ways and new things that our internal staff can do with trying to manage the resources that we have as best we can. We can often be more effective by doing some of these projects in-house. We certainly control some of the areas better. We can control the timing and those types of things. But there's always going to be a need for this program to have a contracted portion of it in order for it to be successful. There's just there's 852 lane miles out there. And when you're doing 15, 16 lane miles of mill and overlay and those type of things, you really need contracted assistance. One thing that I take credit for one thing, I guess, of the program is I wanted to make sure that we were doing outreach with this program. You know, you can have a good program, but if the public doesn't understand what the program is, doesn't understand why we're doing it, why did my street get microsurface instead of mill and overlaid? Why are you crack sealing instead of mill and overlay? It's really important to be transparent with what we're doing with those dollars, but why we're doing it and how it's positively impacting the infrastructure that's out there. So there's a number of things. This is a pamphlet that was developed that we oftentimes send out or have our contractor put on doors as projects are going to be in the area. It's also out on our website as well. Excuse me. Just some summary here from 2015, some of the things we were able to accomplish with the program. You can see there's quite a bit of volume of numbers there. That was our contracted. And there was our numbers internal, our internal numbers. And the as-built map. It just kind of shows you the areas of town that we touched with our program last year. Part of this program, but not part of the funding mechanism of the program, in 2000, the city has always done some form of pavement marking. But one of the things that was identified around 2010 was that we needed to be more aggressive with our pavement marking. And that means getting at the stuff that we weren't putting the more permanent type 3M tapes and the thermoplastic markings on. The pavement markings that were out there that had been painted on streets that were in the projected window of 5 to 7 years for street maintenance. We became a lot more aggressive with how we approached our pavement marking program. You all allowed us to purchase an actual pavement marking machine, which made it possible for us to do in-house versus contracting that operation out. So I want to show that with you because I think it's integral. It's not really pavement maintenance, but it is. It's, you know, it's making sure the lane lines are there and people know where to drive and where the turn lanes and so forth are. So our traffic operations group does all the internal pavement markings for us. This is kind of shows you what they did in the areas that were touched in 2015. But like I said, the cost is part of their operating budget. It's not part of the street maintenance budget. Also, as this program has evolved, and as the city has adopted a complete streets policy, we have also included a lot of other types of facility and infrastructure improvements with our pavement maintenance. That's to say we've done bike lanes, we're doing shared lanes, we've done some rec paths with our programs. We do a lot of ADA handicap ramps with our programs. Some of those because they were in need. Some of those are because of federal requirements. There is a new federal requirement that went into effect in 2016 that any type of maintenance program that passes through a street that also is adjacent to an area that does not have a handicap ramp or the handicap ramp is out of compliance, we have to make those accommodations into compliance. So those are where you see some of the ramp numbers increase there. But the arrow points to the almost $1.5 million for bike lanes and shared use paths. That's not all street maintenance money. That's, you know, when we do CIP replacements and we get KDOT money to do rails to trails and those types of projects. But I wanted you all to see some of those other infrastructure improvements that are also going on with this program. So the summary of our program, a couple things I want to kind of tell you about. The program is a good program. It's moving, but we're seeing some change from cycle 3 to cycle 4 with what we're seeing in the PCI numbers and with the deterioration rates. We're not seeing as much of a change as we saw in cycles between 1 and 2 and 2 and 3, which indicates to us a possible slowing of the success of the program. Deterioration rates, while they're overall positive, I think it's important, if you look at the actual chart that shows the deterioration rates, some of our rates are starting to decline, head back towards that zero, and we do actually have a few deterioration rates that are in the negative number. And the overall percentage of fair to poor streets continues to decline, but that level of decline is kind of tapering off. The other thing to note is, I mentioned earlier, we don't have a dedicated curb and gutter program, and through our inspections of our pavement, we've identified about 260,000 linear feet of bad curb in the city. We think that we need to be having real conversations in the future about how to address some of those needs. The other thing to take away from the program with this slide is that the number of lane miles continue to grow. In 2005, when this current program was developed, we had about 802 lane miles, and today we have about 852 lane miles. So in the last 10 years, we've added about 50 lane miles of streets to the city. And those streets have to be programmed in at some point to have maintenance. The 2016 program, in August, when you all approved our budget, you allotted us $2.8 million for this program. We have verified that with the city's budget manager, that's an accurate number still today. And the way that we select our streets for this is a number of ways, but it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's really a community outreach to get to where we are. We use our statistical numbers to get to a base, and then we go to our different boards. We go to the utility companies in town. We ask them where they've got projects so that we're not doing a mill and overlay, and 6 months later they cut a hole in it. We try to coordinate those. We talk to the bicycle advisory groups. We talk to Complete Streets people. I mean, there's just a number of people we know from data we collect over the year where there's problem areas that we may not be aware of and so forth. And so as a result of that, we come up with a proposed program that tries to get at everything. We also try to spread those dollars around the community so that we're not targeting just one specific area of town a year. This is our current funding chart. Just shows you the funding sources. There's 4. The key thing there to take away is the 2 major sources of funding are the general fund and the infrastructure sales tax. That $800,000 I think expires in would be 2018 year, Diane, is that right? 19. So we've got a few more years where that money will fund our program. Beyond that, the motor fuels tax, which is always, I always have a question about where those funds are going to come in. We project that, but that's going to be dependent on the price of fuel and other things. And then we have a transfer of $140,000 from the stormwater budget to help with curbs and things like that. Complete streets elements, I talked about that. I won't stay on this very long, but we do make sure that we review our program so that it is in compliance to the best of our ability with the policy that the city adopted for complete streets. 2016 program is pretty similar to what programs have been in the past. We're going to have internal crack sealing, microsurfacing, curb rehabilitations, mill and overlays. We have a CLINK project, which is a shared project. The CLINK stands for Kansas Links. That's a maintenance dollars that we get from the state. Our contribution, or their contribution to our program is a maximum of $200,000 a year. We have to match that. In the 8 years that I've been involved with this program, we've always exceeded our match, so we usually do more than a $400,000 program. This year's program is out on Iowa from 31st to 23rd Street. And then there's a list of some other projects that we have scheduled. This is our proposed plan for 2016. This would incorporate the $2.8 million that you all have authorized for this program. The one project that is on this map that is not part of that $2.8 million is the Bob Billings corridor there. That's the black and yellow dotted line. Those funds are coming from other areas in the capital improvement program.
What's the purple one?
The one at the bottom,
The middle, the light lavender kind of purple.
that is 8th Street reconstruction between Tennessee and Kentucky. That's an internal project we're gonna do in-house.
No, the
There's-
one with all the squigglies. I can't tell which side of Castle it's on. The light purple
Oh,
smack
the
in the
pink,
middle.
that's our microsurface area project there.
Is that, what area of town is that? I can't read the city streets. Is that Monterey?
That is west of Iowa and
So Sunset
east
Hills.
of Lawrence
Okay.
Avenue, Bob Billings Parkway to 6th Street,
Thank you.
generally in that area.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I had to look too. And this, as I mentioned, we do pavement marking. This is our plan, again, in-house. I can't tell you the amount of dollars this program, doing this in-house, saves the city each year. We have very dedicated staff. They come in middle of the night and paint makes what otherwise would just be a plain street look pretty good. I think when those new pavement markings pop out at you, looks really good. And then also wanted to show you this. This is a new slide this year in the presentation. The program, when it was developed, was designed around a $6 million budget for each year in order to try to have a sustainable program. And so when the program funding falls short of that $6 million, we have projects that we take off of the map to get at the dollars that we have available to spend. And so if you take the $3 million budget that we had last year and then the $2.8 million budget that we have this year, that's how we get at $3 million deferred from last year and then another $3 million that is being deferred this year from what the program suggests that we should be doing to get at a sustainable program. So these are wanted to show you, these are the streets that have been, that are in the condition that we recommend have maintenance, but the dollars don't support that at this time, so they are deferred maintenance. And this will start in 2017 when we develop our program. These streets will be one of the first corridors that get drawn into that program as well.
Hey, Mark?
Yes.
I can't help but think that a lot of those look like they're in neighborhoods that have brick streets. Is any of that related to the brick street programs that we have, returning streets to brick streets?
Some of the PCI numbers there's about 23 lane miles of brick streets in our community. Over the 852, relatively small number would impact that area. The area south of 15th Street is typically not brick streets. Some of those between 11th and 15th probably are brick streets, but not all of them. The other thing is, a lot of the brick streets that have asphalt on them, when they come up for maintenance, it's not a brick rebuild, we'll take the current layer of asphalt off and put another layer of asphalt on them. So that's when we're talking about maintenance, that's what we're talking about. So, yeah, if the brick street is overlaid and it's potholed, then yes, it would be in those numbers. But if it's a brick street with exposed bricks, while the PCI number would indicate maybe that it needs maintenance, we haven't developed that. Right now, what we do for brick streets is we have our internal staff try to maintain those as best they can, or we try to develop programs to do brick street rebuilds.
Yeah, we have some of those, which I really like those. So I just want to make sure, do those have a stable source of funding year to year to return streets to brick? Or is that just a project by project? Because I know, like Ohio Street, I think we got some state funding for that. I'm sorry, I'm totally derailing your presentation. Very interested in brick streets.
I needed a water break. No, actually, that's a very valid question and probably one that should be included in here. There is no dedicated funding source for brick streets. The brick streets that have been restored since I've been here, and there's about half a dozen or so blocks that have been done, have all been done with grant money or with, we did, with the exception of probably of the 2100 block of Vermont, we did that with street maintenance money, I believe in 14.
That's
So-
great.
So that was, but,
That's really good.
yes, they are part of they are part of that 852 lane miles, and yes, they do need to be maintained. But they're expensive. This is a map that's new this year for you as well. One of the things that I wanted to show you, when we talked about the deterioration rates and what makes a street a good candidate to be maintained or not maintained, we look at its current PCI number. And in the past, you've seen a slide that shows all the PCIs and it's kind of busy. Any colored street that you see on here has a PCI of 65 or less. And as you can see from the chart, red to the lime green. Fortunately for this community, there's not very many reds on there. But these are streets that we consider to be right there on that teetering point that we really want to focus on the most. When you're having to decide to spend $1 on this street or $1 on this street, this is the map that we look at, because these are the streets that are still in a condition that maintenance is a viable and could be successful option to extend the lives of those pavements. So I just wanted you to see that there's a number of those streets out there that are getting close in that window that we really need to be thinking about. Well, these are when it's a colored map, but this is the reality when Steve is out with staff inspecting and evaluating our streets. These are some of the streets that are out there that are not programmed to be maintained. I shouldn't say it that way. Are not programmed in this year's program because of funding or other reasons. But so there are some streets out there that are in need. We talked about this a number of times, and I can't say it enough. I think it's an important element of this program is the outreach that we do and all the public input. It just makes this program so much more successful. Any questions? I wanted to kind of just real quickly had a few points that I want you to take away from this program. First of all, like I said earlier, this program is a good program. It was developed before I came to the city of Lawrence. It's been a pleasure to be part of it. It has done wonderful things for the community, and it will continue to do that the way this program is designed and how it works. But there's a few things that I want to make sure that you take away from tonight's presentation. The citizen survey that was recently conducted still shows that street maintenance remains a high priority for the community. We're not seeing a significant change today in the PCI numbers from phase to phase through this last cycle. We've been fortunate with the fewer mild winters that we've had. Deteriorations have begun to show us some concern. I mentioned that we continue to add pavement to this program. The current, just as kind of a crazy number to throw out there for you, the current replacement value of all 852 lane miles would be about $852 million. If we were to, if we woke up tomorrow and all the streets were gone and we had to put them back down. And that's, that number could be debated, but that's basically the formula that we use to identify construction costs of $1 million a lane mile. We have a curb and gutter issue that we've talked about. That 260,000 linear feet or so, that has a price tag of about $10 million. We have, and you saw the slide, and I hate these comments sound kind of negative, but it's fair to the program, I think. A program that I value has been being successful, that you all are aware of some of the things that we're seeing out there. So with that, tonight we'd like you to adopt the current program that was presented to you, the $2.8 million for expenditures for maintenance. We'd also like you to allow us to use $40,000 from the infrastructure sales tax that you allocated for bicycle and pedestrian improvements in your 2016 program. For the bicycle, specifically for the bicycle improvements that will be put in with this street maintenance program, there's approximately 94 sharrows and some bike way identifying signs that will be added. We'd also like you to authorize us to use $30,000 from the infrastructure sales tax that you all allocated in your budget this year for traffic calming for the 3 speed humps that will be built this year with this program on Crest Line. With that, I'll stand for questions. Mike Perkins, our street division manager's here, as well as Steve Lashley, our pavement engineer. The guys that I mentioned are really the ones that make this program happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Questions? Vice Mayor.
I got 2 questions. I had kind of a general thought of when you were talking about how a lot of the streets seem to be deteriorating perhaps more rapidly. I'm not sure how you might phrase that, but I couldn't help but think about how last year we had our, record construction total dollar numbers. So, I mean, do you think the increased heavy traffic on our streets because of the increased construction, or is that just a crazy correlation I'm trying to make?
No, it's not really out there all that far. Traffic on our roadways nationally is increasing, and it's not just here in the community. I think you're suggesting maybe that traffic that's being detoured through areas and things like that. We do take that into consideration when we're building our program. But I think the overriding factor that we look at is in the deterioration rates is that they're kind of exponential. So in a year that a street is identified for maintenance, it may have a PCI of 60 or say 65. If we don't perform that maintenance in that year and we let it go through another 12 months of weather and traffic, that PCI doesn't change equal each year. That's where the deterioration rate comes about. And so that's why we try to identify those early on, and we actually use those deterioration rates. I do, and Steve does, more than PCI. PCI makes it easy to say, where a street rates, but if it's a street that has a slower deterioration rate than another street that may have a higher PCI, the higher deterioration rate street actually would or should be done, should be maintained first.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's definitely a great program, a lot of reporting. I mean, that's a lot of work that you put into that. My second question, I was curious, with the Complete Streets, is sidewalks included in the funding of any of this stuff in here that we're talking about?
I can't say that we have never done a sidewalk.
But it's pretty much just strictly the street we're talking about.
This is pretty much from back of curb to back of curb with the inclusion of handicap ramps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I am, like I said, I am interested in some kind of line item for brick streets somehow, whether it be returning them to brick, especially in historic districts, which I know is just crazy expensive. So getting grants, obviously is a great idea. But even just maintaining them, Vermont, I mean, that's a really stellar street. I just drove on it the other day.
Okay. Other questions, Matt?
Yeah. On your, you can go back to the slide on bike improvements by year. I just had a question as to why there was such a huge jump in cost between 2013 and 2014. 2013, it appears that we did, 21,000 and change linear feet for 142,000. But then in 2014, we do essentially the exact same amount of linear footage, and it becomes 3 times as expensive, or nearly 3 times. I mean, what explains that cost? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Bike lane, some of that bike lane cost is we simply, get the street name right, Peterson.
Uh-huh.
Peterson, when we did that in 2013 or 14. Princeton, yes,
Right.
Thank you, Chuck. Princeton. Or Lawrence. The street itself was wide enough to do a reconfiguration within its footprint to add a bike lane. So that cost merely
Just basically
was the
painting,
striping.
yeah.
We've done other bike lanes, I guess I'm trying to think of one where we've actually rebuilt the street, like Wakarusa, where we've actually widened the street to add the bike lane. So if you take the cost of widening the street, that's how those numbers seem
Gotcha.
off. Yeah.
And the only other question I had, I think it was one of the very first slides you had shown, talked about the number of individuals who have reported potholes. And it looked like we had, if you can go back to that one, I think that might have been your second slide. Oops, there it is, right there. Obviously, going from 2014 to 2015, we have almost an increase of 1,000 reports. Did we do anything in terms of making it easier to report? I mean, or is this just 1,000 more reports than the year before? Because it seems to be, if you look at 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, it never comes anywhere near approaching 1,000, and then suddenly we're at 1,300.
I would like to think it's due to two things. One is the outreach that we've continued to try to do. I know we made some changes to our website, and we continually do that to try to make it easier. There was one of those Channel 25 releases that went out. Megan, I can't think of what we called those, but the public information commercials that we did that kind of talked about how to report. But some of it's simply that there's more potholes out there.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if it was due to outreach, if we had actually on paper made ourselves look worse by making it easier for people to report, as could happen. But no, I think you do an outstanding job. I had an opportunity to, early on, I think it was in May, I had an opportunity to spend a day working with the guys painting the roads. And they do a fabulous job. They take their job very seriously, and they're out there at 4 or 5 in the morning doing that. So, which that part I didn't appreciate so much traveling with them, but they do a fantastic job. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Stuart, you had some?
Yeah, I just want to ask about the traffic calming.
Okay.
Is that on Crescent or
It is.
Crestline?
I'm sorry. You're correct, Crescent.
It's on Crescent?
Yes.
Okay.
On the pothole. You have up there right now. I noticed that it seems like the use of hot mix over the years has really significantly increased, but yet our numbers of whole patch has decreased throughout the years. So like in 2011, we went from 664 to, in 2015 to 3,800 tons of hop. Is there a reason for that? That's
Sure.
big of a change?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess one of the reasons is the milder winters has allowed us to use asphalt, hot mix asphalt. While the plant's locally shut down, we can get hot mix year-round from Kansas City, but it only makes sense to do that if the ambient temperatures are such that we can get it from Kansas City to Lawrence before it cools down. The other thing that Mike has done with his program, and I mentioned it earlier about if you looked at the pothole numbers, the 98 to 88, why the numbers are up, but the actual potholes patched are down, is because instead of the philosophy of walk 2 feet, throw cold mix in a hole, walk 2 more feet, we're actually squaring that area, that whole area up, and trying to do more than just a pothole patch. We're trying to do a maintenance patch. So we wouldn't do that with cold patch. That would not be a productive tool. So when we have hot mix available, that's how we're getting at that. So that's how that number.
Which is better to use, hot mix or cold mix?
Which is better?
Which provides a better seal longer?
A hot mix.
Hot mix.
Yeah.
Mark, that one new machine we bought several years ago, is that reflected in these numbers here somewhere?
Mayor, that's the last number there. That's the Durapatcher. That's a
Okay.
trade name. It's basically spray injection patching.
Okay. Just making sure it's working right.
It is. I love that machine.
I know.
I don't have a lot of staff that agree with that, but it is a very productive machine.
Well, I'm one of them that you talked into buying that, I think. So, I just want to make sure that we're getting our money's worth.
We do.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions of staff? Mark, thanks for all the work. Thank you. Public comment on this item. Any public comment?
Sorry, I lost the agenda. I knew I was going to have a snafu. Sorry about that, Marilyn.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Marilyn Hull. I live at 1621 Oxford Road. You all know that I'm the current chair of the Pedestrian Bicycle Issues Task Force, but I want to clarify that I'm not here tonight speaking for the task force. I'm here as a private citizen expressing a concern. So less than a year ago, those of us that are interested in all means of travel around Lawrence were really excited to see a breakthrough in that $200,000 for the first time was dedicated in the city budget to provide additional facilities that would improve safety for people who walk, wheel in a wheelchair, or ride a bike. At that time, and I could be wrong about this, but to me there was a good faith understanding that that $200,000 would be for additional facilities that were not already being put in or taken care of as part of the pavement maintenance program. What we now see is a proposal to take $40,000 of that 200, which is 20% of that budget, and move it over into activities that actually use it to do things that were previously done, at least for the last few years, as part of the overall pavement maintenance program. I understand the budget constraints that the city has and the problems with pavement and pavement maintenance. I truly do. But this feels a little bit from the perspective of a pedestrian bicycle person, like an accounting switcheroo, like we got $200,000 and now we're taking $40,000 of it back for something that has been done over the years out of another pot of money. So just wanted to appeal to you to consider rejecting using that $40,000 that's set aside for pedestrian and bicycle projects as part of this work, and rather maintaining that amount intact for facilities that are really dedicated to pedestrians and bicyclists and wheelers. Markings on pavement may or may not help, and signs may or may not help, but there's still treatments on the street that's there for the cars. So essentially just wanted to call on you to consider that. And as we move forward and you get the pedestrian bicycle issues task force final report, we're looking forward to working with you to, over time, increase the resources available to fill in our sidewalks and that kind of activity. And I think this sets a little bit of a bad precedent. Thank you.
I have a question. Yeah. That's okay.
That's fine.
All right. I just wanted to clarify, so towards the end you were saying that you wanted to see that money, which I think, if I'm understanding right, you're saying you want the $40,000 to go back where it would not be anything automobile related? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you know, pavement marking, I mean, there's some question about whether sharrows are effective or not. There's some recent research that they're not really effective. And even when they are used, they tend to provide a marginal benefit to experienced adult bicycle riders who are riding along streets that may have parked cars or other complications. You know, what our task force is, well, not speaking for the task force, what I'm interested in is facilities that get more people on bikes and more people using our sidewalks and walking and wheeling. And you know, the type of projects that are proposed for this won't do that. There won't. I don't believe they will result in additional people deciding that they feel safe riding a bike in the community, for example.
Okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
Other public comment on this item? Any other public comment?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. Take care of homework there first. My name is Chris Tilden. I live at 1121 Williamsburg Court.
Like Marilyn, my professional experience certainly plays into the judgment I have on a lot of these issues. So first and foremost, I'd like to say my principal reason for being here is that my professional work has allowed me to work alongside Chuck and Mark and many members of their staff over the last couple of years, and I commend them for the work that they do. It's a difficult job, and they do just a fantastic job taking care of our roads and putting together a proactive strategy that gets the most out of the dollars, the limited dollars that are available. So that's my principal reason to appear before you all. I would like to echo, what Marilyn said, and that is certainly last year we were really pleased. I was pleased as a citizen and as someone participating in the work of Live Well and Safe Routes to School with the inclusion of the $200,000. And there's a variety of bike and pedestrian infrastructure projects that have been proposed, and I'm not representing Safe Routes or Live Well in saying what the best use of that money might be, but there's one particular experience this year that has kind of been really influential as I think about these issues, and that was an opportunity to, along with Josh Shelton of the East Ninth Project, to meet with Lorraine Canistra and experience her journey along a couple blocks of the East Ninth Project. She's an individual who lives in East Lawrence, is in a wheelchair, and there were probably 20 spots along a 2-block stretch where she said if there wasn't someone to help me with my wheelchair here, I would be effectively blocked and could not get any further. She lives in East Lawrence, and as we talked about the development of the extension of the Burroughs Creek Trail and the East Ninth Project, she said, for the first time since I've lived in this house, those 2 projects in their entirety will allow me to get downtown in my wheelchair when those projects are completed. And then I look at the Pedestrian Bike Task Force report, which has over the next 4 years about $1.5 million in proposed improvements, of which close to a third of that, close to $500,000, is simply ADA ramps that are currently missing along the 51 miles of designated Safe Routes ramps. And I think about the Sharrows. They may or may not be effective, but they're certainly not going to stop me as an avid cyclist from getting out and riding a bike. But that ramp may prevent a child in a wheelchair or using some other mobility device from getting to school if they chose to do so. It may prevent a grandparent who would like to walk with their grandchildren to school from doing that. They are stopped when they reach that ramp that doesn't exist. So I'd love to see us thinking about where are those just absolute needs that we now have a 5-year report for that kind of outline progress that can be made, and thinking about can we address some of those needs now through some of the funding that has been set aside for these types of projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Other public comment? Any other public comment? Back to the commission. The program that we have before us, and it's an excellent program. I think Mark and Chuck, the staff, they do a great job laying out the program for us. I'm going to be honest with you, the discussion that we had at budget time, I don't recall exactly if we said that was going to be for new projects, and so I apologize for that, not being able to tell you whether or not that was the deal yet. One of the things that we can do, and I don't know if we have to give specific direction on the markings tonight or the bicycle issues, or if that has to be designed into the program tonight.
I think, Mayor, if there's a desire to have that funding restored as far as bike pedestrian improvements, we can make the necessary adjustments in the remainder of the program to do so. And
here's the deal, Diane, and Mark or Chuck, if we were to give direction to say, okay, that money is to be used for new programs, things that were not to be included here, where would the money come from? It wouldn't come from the our pavement program to offset, those markings and signs and such, would it?
I believe that they're all part of the same sales tax fund, both the pavement maintenance program as was allocated in the budget, as well as the funding for traffic calming and the bike pedestrian improvements money.
That's from the sales tax?
All of that is from the sales tax.
Okay.
So to the extent that the funding from the 200,000 in bike ped improvements is restored to that, we'll just have to make an adjustment on the street side, which we can certainly do. If that's the direction of the commission, we can certainly do that and make that adjustment.
So it's kind of hard to play catch-up in the streets. I understand Marilyn and Chris's concerns. It's I don't know, it's the same money. Any help, guys?
I would like to see the money that is set aside, the $200,000, used more for actual building of facilities that would increase the ability of all citizens of Lawrence to be on the sidewalks, to be on the bike trails. I would like to see it used more for infrastructure versus just the markings on the street. That's 20%, is that?
Commissioner, I think we all want to see that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would,
The deal here is do we take away from traffic calming and do we take away from the pavement management program? We've only got so much money. The amount of money is there. It's 2.81 million. And, we can divide it up any way we want, but
I guess
that's all there is, right?
Maybe the discussion to have there, because you're totally right that if we pay for one thing out of this pocket, then we got to pay for something else out of a different pocket. But maybe the conversation to be had is brought up by Chris, his comments of when it comes right down to it, are the pavement markings a necessary thing to be paying for right now? That ultimately the necessary things that we have, the absence of sidewalks, the absence of ramps, those are very necessary things. And so to say that, well, if we pay for the markings out of this pocket instead of that pocket, ignores the possible conclusion we could come to say, let's not pay for the markings at all, and instead devote that money towards bettering sidewalks, bettering roads, bettering, actually creating the infrastructure instead of just drawing on it.
I knew there was a smart way to do it.
It sounds like it might be helpful if we had the bicycle advisory committee perhaps, kind of formally discuss if they want us to perhaps deprioritize the Sharrow markings and prioritize other bike-related things, instead of having them on the same priority level. Is that what I'm hearing perhaps?
Commissioner, the last item that was attached to the packet on this item was actually from the BAC.
Oh.
So the Sharrows that are talked about in this program, let me bring that up for you.
Here's a table.
I see.
These are the BAC recommendations. Those are the 94 Sharrows and bike signs that they recommended be placed with this program. That's where those dollars, that $40,000 comes from.
Can you clarify, Diane, your comments about being able to come up with that $40,000 from someplace else?
Well, I think that what we would do is just simply slightly reduce our street maintenance program by the 40,000 to maintain the full 200,000 earmarked for bike and pedestrian. And honestly, as Mark had indicated, we are quite a bit behind related to street maintenance where we should be perhaps funding it. $40,000 is probably not going to make an enormous difference in that. So if the commission, this really just is a policy issue where you would like to prioritize the dollars. And, I tend to agree with those that commented from the public our intention was to try and provide some additional resources related to bike and pedestrian improvements. And so in that vein, I think,
I guess my take would be to go ahead and improve the maintenance program, improve the traffic calming, defer the $40,000 until we have a,
Well, I just think, we don't do those improvements this year. We just reduce the maintenance program by the
Yeah,
40,000, and we keep that $40,000 for new projects, whether it be sidewalks or those improvements, as that was our original intent.
right?
I think that that's what we do. Okay. Okay. Any questions specific about the programs and any of the street recommendations or any of that? Vice Mayor, your comments about Brick Street's duly noted. I would suggest that we're given this pavement management report again during budget time, just to remind us, especially the deferred, especially the deferred maintenance.
Yeah.
Especially the deferred maintenance projects that we do have, and that list will continue to grow, so I think that we need to be aware of that.
I guess one other comment is that this doesn't talk about the sidewalks and the trails that are also part of our transit system. And at what point do we start wrapping the whole big picture together so we talk about what we do for transit for everybody? Not, oh, here's cars, oh, here's safe routes to school, here's, when can we get the big picture for everything, not just this?
well, I think we have different, part of the answer to that is we have different departments right now that are maintaining different parts of the infrastructure.
Okay.
I think we can talk about getting better cohesion regarding that presentation, but we definitely do have maintenance needs on trails and, other facilities as well.
Right. But I guess my point is, when we talk about money, we're talking about the same pot of money for everything. And how do we divide that up? And it's important to have a global conversation about that as we do that.
I would, however, say that with regard to the infrastructure sales tax, I think that a large part of that program and its emphasis obviously was street maintenance, as it was, portrayed to the voters.
That's a good point.
I think that we've been talking about a new transportation advisory board. That might be helpful for collaboration, especially when talking about budget expenses. I did want to ask about the brick streets. With what's going on with the state budget, is it foolish to think we could ever get another brick street grant?
I don't think it's foolish to think that. In 30 years of working with the federal government on different programs, they seem to always figure out a way to fund their different grants. Some of that's federal pass-through money versus the state money. The state manages it for the federal government, but it's a direct pass-through to us with the transportation enhancement or the transportation alternative program, it's called now.
The funding source is federal money that's passed through the state. And so, it has been continuing to be there. It's money that we wrote a grant for related to the Santa Fe Station, for example, same kind of pot of money, historic transportation infrastructure.
Right, exactly.
I wonder if because of course we have that conference in Washington DC coming up, if we could figure out who perhaps we could meet with to try to get in their good graces for Brick Street funding somehow.
The decisions for that money, though, are made at the state level. So while they're federal pass-throughs, the State Department of Transportation works with that. And I believe that particularly for those that are in that historic category, they work with the State Historic Preservation Office in prioritizing that funding. Lawrence has been extremely fortunate, I think, statewide, as far as how much money that we've been able to leverage from that particular source. Probably not many other cities have been able to do what we've done with the brick streets.
Well, it's definitely something I'm really interested in if you're needing a city commissioner to I have no idea do what, but
It's great to know. I can't remember.
you just tell
the-
me.
The exact cycle.
And I'll do
of
my
that,
best to
when that
help.
will be back up
Yes,
again.
I
Do you
need to talk
remember?
Yeah, go bang the drum over there. Go get us some-
They are doing it every 2 years now, and so it'll be next year then that will be the next round, and we'll be bringing some, we always bring proposals for you all to consider for us
Yeah.
to apply.
Maybe I can help drum up general support from like LPA or
There you
any
go.
other
There you go.
entities around town or something, but
Well, certainly keeping that particular source is very good, the way that they're allocated, so that there's a particular allocation of funding for that category, which has been nice. Again, I think that's why we've been able to leverage it well.
thank
Okay.
you.
So any other questions? Okay, the item before us then is to approve the 2016 pavement management program, and I think that the direction here is that we're to use the $40,000 for new projects, as was outlined in our budget recommendation, and that we're given direction that we would reduce our pavement management program by $40,000, and we'll continue to do those recommended items for traffic calming, but just the pavement system's going to be reduced by 40K, okay? Fair enough? So with those changes, I would entertain a motion to approve the 2016 pavement management program.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second for approval, made by Commissioner Boley, second by Commissioner Herbert. All in favor of that motion, aye? Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0. Before we go into executive session, the individual here that was to bring public comment earlier is now here. If we could go ahead and add an additional 5 minutes for public comment. I would open general public comment up again for Melinda. And Melinda, again, this is for new items that are not on the agenda this evening. Okay?
Thank you. I apologize for being tardy. We had a minor issue with the dog as I was leaving. I do have some handouts, so I want to get these out first. They kind of go along with the PowerPoint, but I thought it would be easier if you had your own too.
Okay.
First thing I want to do, I have my own folder now. I was at PC last night. Okay, so I'm just gonna leave this up for everybody to, kind of try to read, and I'm gonna be handing it out, and you all will have your hard copies.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Melinda Henderson, and I live in Lawrence. And as if the City Commission and Planning Commission don't give me enough politics to follow. I've also been following the legislative session in Topeka. Excuse me. So, yesterday, I was trying to follow the House and the Senate. And when I switched over to the Senate live stream, I was very surprised to hear Senator Marcy Francisco and Senator Tom Holland discussing the topic of inclusionary zoning. And they sounded somewhat desperate and frustrated. And I was puzzled because I didn't realize what they would have been talking about, because I try to pay attention and follow what's going on over there, and neither one of them had contacted me. So I did some research. They were discussing Senate Bill 366, and what that was a bill that was introduced into the Senate on January 26th and referred to the Committee on Commerce. So here's the text of the bill, and basically what it is just revising it a little bit. We already have state legislation as far as rental, as far as rent control goes, and they wanted to add the wording in italics. The supplementary note basically is a little bit more readable, and it will explain to you, you know, what they want to add. They want to add control of the purchase price that's agreed on, and not just leave it at rent control. So, this bill was introduced on January 26th to the Senate after the session started, and was referred to the Committee on Commerce. Senator Holland is the ranking minority leader on the Commerce Committee in the Senate. On Friday, February 12th, they scheduled a hearing for this bill to take place on Wednesday, February 17th. Senator Holland was there for at the committee meeting that day. The League of Kansas Municipalities submitted testimony, and the Kansas Association of Realtors submitted testimony as well. In fact, this bill came from the Kansas Association of Realtors, and I'm pretty sure it was at the request of some people in Lawrence. I don't have all the details. During the committee meeting, I talked to Senator Holland and Senator Francisco today to try to get more clarification. Senator Holland told me that he had contacted Tony last week to have her look it over, make any suggestions if possible, and that she agreed it was a very badly written bill and very broad. And that was one of Senator Holland's main concerns, is that it's just so broad that, you know, it could be very dangerous. So they had the hearing. Nobody from Lawrence was present, but during the testimony, it became obvious that this bill is directed at Lawrence and our affordable housing project or program process. You know, whatever we're doing to work on ideas for affordable housing. It references one city in Kansas, and that's Lawrence. And Lawrence was also mentioned during the debate yesterday on the Senate floor. So the bill was passed on February 18th and went to the Committee of the Whole on the Senate floor yesterday. And once again, Senator Holland and Senator Francisco tried to make their comment, their concerns known. Senator Francisco did email me her reasoning for her no vote, so that it could be put in the record. So she emailed that to me, and that discusses some of the concerns that she had. So it was passed by the Senate today on a vote of 34-6. So that's kind of scary, I think. So now they're in turnaround, and next week, the bodies will exchange bills. So this bill will now go to the House Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development. And we don't have anybody from Lawrence who's on that particular committee. But that shouldn't be a problem. So let me just tell you a little bit about what SB 366 could do. I think the article from the Capital Journal gives you a good overview of what happened. I know that the topic or the concept of inclusionary zoning, which that term is not actually mentioned in the language, but Luke Bell, who is the lobbyist for Kansas Association of Realtors, has used that term. And I know that's a touchy issue, but I have real concerns that there was an opportunity for KAR to go ahead and submit this, and nobody from Lawrence spoke to this issue. And so then I was kind of curious how that could happen. So last night when I was at Planning Commission, I had emailed Diane and Randy and Lawrence and said, what is this? What's going on? And I saw Randy last night, and I said, did you know about this bill? And he said, no, kind of weird. And then I talked with Scott, and I asked him as well. And, he said that, yeah, he had been aware of it, but he seemed not to be too worried about it because inclusionary zoning is not going to fly in Lawrence. So this morning, I emailed him back just to make sure that I was very clear on, why nobody had been notified. And up on the screen is the last, I think, is the last, his text, and it should be the last handout that you all have. And what he said was, Melinda, as I understand it, this particular bill is a direct result of recent discussion the city has had related to inclusionary zoning as a method of addressing affordable housing. While I agree that cities should be left to speak directly to the issue of price controls, in my opinion, inclusionary zoning is not likely to become a method by which to address the need for affordable housing. So we did not put resources into commenting on the bill. The Affordable Housing Advisory Board is discussing several programs at this time, but our advice to the board will be that there are more appropriate and effective programs for Lawrence to address this issue. So, my biggest concern is that because Lawrence did not provide any testimony so far, and it's passed out of the Senate and is on its merry way to the House, that we may very well have lost one option to provide affordable housing in this community. If you, the single sheet I handed you is the testimony or email testimony that Luke Bell sent to the senators yesterday morning, explaining why he wanted them to vote yes on the bill. And I didn't put it in the PowerPoint because it would just really be too teeny. But this quote really stood out. If the Kansas legislature does not act during the 2016 legislative session, we anticipate that at least one Kansas City, Lawrence, and potentially more will impose price control mandates on private property owners this year. I spoke with Sarah Marsh from Justice Matters today. She heads the affordable housing work group, and apparently they're very displeased to hear about this. And you all know Senator Francisco. If anyone in this community understands the benefits of positive aspects of inclusionary zoning, it would be Senator Francisco. On the Capital Journal article down at the bottom, next to the last paragraph is a great quote from Senator Francisco. She said, inclusionary zoning would permit a developer to build residential buildings at a higher density than normally permitted in exchange for a pledge to include units in a new subdivision for low to moderate income customers. The additional density serves to compensate builders for the differentiation in construction. So with that, I just have 4 questions for you all, which you don't have to answer tonight, but I would like them answered. 1, what is the procedure for the city commissioners to be notified about possible legislation that could affect home rule or land use code or anything else? This is the state legislature we're talking about, so who knows? What is the procedure for the city to decide whether or not to provide testimony, whether pro or con, on a bill submitted to the legislature? Number 3, will the city be providing testimony against this bill when the legislature reconvenes and it comes up in the House? 4, will the city create a policy with procedures to assure that something like this never happens again? Thank you very much for allowing me to speak to this issue tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have at this point in time.
Any questions, Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Diane, can we get answers to those questions? And also, the commission, do we want to provide testimony on this as it goes to the House?
Well, it sounds like our elected representatives are doing that. So I don't know, I'm a new commissioner, so I don't know what additional help that would be for the city of Lawrence and not just our elected reps to give testimony.
If this is directed exactly as Melinda is bringing up, directed solely at the city of Lawrence, Kansas, I think that we have an obligation to probably testify before the committee.
Right, and we can certainly provide that, such testimony, and I think that it is helpful. I will say, I will take full responsibility for not putting anything together on this particular item. I will say that there is not, we had no indication that this was something that was aimed at the city of Lawrence. It's certainly not what is reflected in the bill.
Diane, as I told Melinda earlier today, after I got her email early this morning, I had gone through everything that I had received from you or any member of the staff that dealt with any of the legislation that was coming forward. I went through the league stuff. I mean, I literally didn't find anything that would raise, my concern to see that we'd been singled out.
And so many bills,
What,
come through, it's
39
hard.
of them in 2 days,
Right,
and,
yeah.
everything that's going on right now.
And
So.
honestly, I would say that, it is a indication of staff time and resources that we have to respond to these things and to read them and understand them. We get a lot of communication from the league, and we're a member of the League of Kansas Municipalities, so we do rely a lot on the league to help us and notify us of things, and also just, generally speak on behalf of cities. But if the commission so directs, we'd be happy to prepare something that we could submit as testimony on this bill. I think given the concerns and the article in the Topeka Capital Journal, we could certainly do so. My biggest concern with it is similar to the league's testimony, that it certainly is, has major home rule implications for us and all cities across the state, really, for implementing any kind of tools that they believe may be helpful to solve local issues.
And I think that, like Larry McElwain says about the incentives that we use for economic development, affordable housing is a very critical issue for our economic development in Lawrence because we have the highest real estate costs in the state. So when we bring Menards in, we need a place for the folks who are going to be working at Menards, at their plant to live in our community. So it's an economic development issue for us. And I'm not sure that they factor that in. I mean, they're taking away some of our tools to deal with the economic development issues that we have that Larry McElwain wants in our toolbox.
Well, and I think generally this is why home rule in Kansas has been so important. And I think we need to be vigilant on this and other home rule issues to protect our ability to be able to act on things as we think is appropriate given local issues.
Well, my recommendation to the commission then is that we direct staff to prepare testimony on this, notify our legislators that we will be providing that testimony, and that we figure out where we can get help to take care of the matter, okay?
That's what I'm wondering is, do we also contact the league?
We contact everybody that'll give us help.
Senator Francisco, I'm sure, is going to make herself available as soon as she can.
Let's talk to our entire delegation, see where we can get help, okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
I
your time.
appreciate it.
Thanks for your help.
Your research.
Yeah. Okay, next item on the agenda then, as we leave general public comment, is to consider a motion to recess into executive session for approximately 10 minutes. 10 minutes. For consultation with attorneys for the city which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship. The justification for the executive session is to keep attorney-client matters confidential at this time. At the conclusion of the executive session, the City Commission will resume its regular meeting in the City Commission room. Would entertain a motion to recess into executive session for approximately 10 minutes.
So moved. Second.
Motion made and second to approve the motion to recess into executive session for 10 minutes was made by Commissioner Boley, second by Commissioner Herbert. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? An executive session. We have nothing to report at this time, so next item on the agenda is future agenda items. Diane.
Yes, Mayor and Commissioners, we have quite a few items here for your meeting on March the 1st. The ISO, the Insurance Service Office representatives will be here in order to draw attention to us receiving that Community 1 ranking, the highest ranking in the country, and literally there are only a couple handfuls of communities that both are accredited and have this rating. So it's a real, I think, point of pride for the community and our fire medical department. On the regular agenda for you, we have the issue of the dog kennel license fee and how we want to handle that issue. Depending on the number of items here, and if you desire to have any of these perhaps moved to the 8th, we could look at that, but we have that item. We have the Food Truck Festival that is now ready to proceed and come back to this body. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund demonstration project will be coming to you for a project for recommendation for that. And we have the Commissioner Herbert's issue related to the charitable donations in lieu of parking fines. And then a couple of those, the deferred items from our meeting last week, the Emerald Ash Borer and the travel policy. I will note that this one's stacking up for a couple of reasons. We do have Vice Mayor Soden, Commissioner Larsen, and I will be not here on the 8th. We also do have spring break on the 15th. So probably a light agenda on the 8th, but if there's any of these items, for example, that dog kennel license, I don't know if you all want to hear that on the 8th, but that may be something for you to discuss. We've got quite a bit here lined up for the 1st.
All these easy meetings, that's what this is about.
I know.
We'll look through them, Diane.
Okay.
Okay. Commission items.
Diane had asked that I bring this up in the commission items that annually we have a delegation of business and community leaders and public officials that go to DC to advocate on behalf of Lawrence. And this year that will be April 12th to April 14th. And I would like to attend on behalf of the city of Lawrence and seek out if there would be any other commissioner on the commission that would be interested in going on behalf of the city along with me.
Since we're going to DC in March, I won't be going to that
Okay.
one. It would be nice that I could make payroll.
Yeah.
2 trips, but I cannot.
Okay. We'll discuss, if one of the other 2 of us can go during that time. But I appreciate you stepping up and doing that, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew.
Okay. Other commission items?
Good to have you back.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's good to be back. Like I said, I watched y'all last week. It's amazing.
He sounds a bit better.
Yeah, I did sound a lot better.
Still got those cough drops there.
I still, oh, did we approve the claims?
Thanks, Mike. Trying to save us $4 million.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. Sorry, Vice Mayor.
So he did watch.
I was gonna send you an email, and I said, no, I'm sick.
Hey, I could have did a lot worse than that,
No.
that's for sure.
You did fine.
I did on when
Hey,
we
we got it
received the
done.
You did.
resignation.
Got it done, right?
You did fine.
Got the payroll.
Thank you.
What was it? Don't tell him what we did. That was the only part that was missing. Okay, calendar items.
Just to draw to your attention, Mayor, as you mentioned, next week's pretty busy with meetings, and we'll get this updated with the CIC meeting for the East Ninth project.
Okay.
But we also have a KDOT is hosting a meeting on K10 I-70 that I know is generating a lot of interest for Thursday, March the 3rd. And then again, we have the public meeting on the 19th Street project. There is a typo there, as I reported earlier. It is March the 2nd, so sorry about that, we'll get that fixed, not the 7th.
Project?
It's on the 2nd.
Yeah,
It's a public
okay.
meeting on the 2nd.
Got it.
Yeah, so I'll get that corrected. And then, again, Three of us will be attending the National League of Cities Congressional City Conference coming up. As part of that, we'll be meeting with a national group looking at affordable housing issues and trying to get their thoughts on that. And then I just wanted to note that Regional Economic Development Educational Seminar on Thursday, March the 10th.
And then the meeting with the neighborhood around the Lawrence Community Shelter is this Thursday, Wednesday? I have it on my calendar. I'm not sure I can go, but
I think it's the 24th, isn't it?
Is it tomorrow?
Wednesday.
I don't
Yeah,
recall that right
Wednesday
off.
at 6.
And that is at the community shelter?
I have on here it's at the shelter. Should probably double check though. Yeah, tomorrow, I
Okay,
guess
we
is
have
what we're
people
saying.
that are going to be able to attend that. 'Cause I'm
Yeah,
gonna
do we
be-
have
I'm
staff
gonna be
going to
gone.
that or
No,
do we need staff going to that, I
that
guess?
we do. I know we have been checking with them on their meeting. I will say, we have been working with the neighborhood on some other possibly related issues that we do plan to meet with neighbors. The Parks and Rec Department, there have been some concerns related to Prairie Park, and then also wanted to include the police department on that meeting.
This is actually required by the special use permit for the shelter. So I think it'd be really good for some staff to go and attend this meeting since we've required it under our special use permit.
We certainly can do that. It's been typical that they include some of that in their annual report that is owed to the commission. We've
And
you know,
since they
reminded
haven't
them.
actually done these regularly, I think it's a good idea for us to send staff.
We will do that.
Okay.
Is it 6 tomorrow?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, it's fine. Tomorrow night I'm gonna be gone, so.
Do we need to add that? Are more than 2 of you going to be present?
Lisa, you
Yeah,
planning on going to that?
yeah, I can, yeah, for part of it at least, for probably an hour. I don't know how long it'll last.
I've got a conflict, so I'm not.
I'm not gonna be back.
So Leslie, you're going to be there too.
I'm not sure. I have it on my calendar. I don't know if I'll be able to make it.
It's at the.
Add it
community
to our
shelter.
calendar
Is that
just in
what's
Do
case.
you know where that's at?
Okay.
One other one to add, I don't know if anybody else is going this Saturday to the Library Foundation after hours.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds like more than 3, okay.
Yes, it does.
Saturday, February 27th, the Library Foundation After Hours at the Library event. It's 7 p.m.
That's a
It
ticketed
is
event.
ticketed.
Very
Does
good.
that matter?
We note that, but we'll say
it's a
by
ticketed
invitation
event,
only.
yeah.
Just pretend I don't know you guys.
Stay away.
So you taking these guys to the Spy Museum?
If they'd like to go.
Spy.
Spy Museum, that's it, that's classic.
Safe to say, we have a pretty packed schedule.
Including the Spy Museum. Okay, any other calendar items? I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second to adjourn, made by Vice Mayor Soden, second by Commissioner Larsen. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, opposed. Thank you all, we are adjourned.
Good meeting.
So this meeting Thursday,